In this issue, we will talk about the most ancient of all currently existing religions. Followers of this religion believe in the transmigration of souls, honor cows, and worship many different gods. 10 interesting facts about Hinduism are waiting for you. Hinduism is the third religion in the world by number of followers after Christianity and Islam. In total, there are approximately 1 billion Hindus on the planet. Unlike Christianity and Islam, which are spread in many countries, 99% of Hindus live only in India, as well as in a few neighboring countries, Nepal and Bangladesh. These are countries with very large populations, which is why there are so many followers of Hinduism. Unlike the vast majority of religions, Hinduism does not have a founder or prophet like Abraham, Jesus, or Muhammad. That being said, Hinduism is the oldest religion in existence. It began to form about 4,000 years ago and is a mixture of the various practices and beliefs of the peoples who lived in ancient India. In Christianity and Islam, for example, there are many different faiths: Catholics and Orthodox, Sunnis and Shiites. So in Hinduism, there are even more of these confessions, and the differences between them can be much more significant than between the confessions of Christianity and Islam. There is no single doctrine in Hinduism, but almost all branches have common principles and beliefs. I will now tell you about them. Right away, I want to note that I will tell about Hinduism in a very simplified form, omitting many details, because otherwise, the story about what they believe in would take a lot of time, and it would not be enough for other facts. So if you are an expert on Hinduism, please bear with me. First of all Hindus believe in the concept of Brahman. It is the universal absolute, in fact, that of which the whole universe is composed. And yet he himself is also the universe. Everything around is Brahman and its manifestation. It has no gender. It is eternal, immobile, and omnipresent. Brahman can be compared to an ocean, and human souls can be compared to drops in that ocean. A drop is not an ocean, but it is a particle of the ocean, and sooner or later returns back to it. The same happens with human souls in Hinduism, where the soul is called Atman. Initially, the Atman is a part of Brahman, and the actions of this Atman, that is the soul, in life affect what shell it will become in the next life. This law is called karma. Many of you are familiar with this concept. The law of karma states that if you do bad things will be done to you in the next life, and vice versa. To earn yourself good karma, you have to follow a concept called dharma. It can be explained as a kind of prescription of how one should live, a kind of moral duty and correct behavior. Every human being, has its own dharma, which is described in the holy books. For example, the dharma of a tiger is to hunt and kill prey. The dharma of a cow is to give milk and feed people. The dharma of a king is to rule his state justly. From the Dharma viewer, Dremanis. For this, subscribe to the channel and click on the bell, and leave a comment under his video. If all beings in the world follow their dharma, there will be no war and suffering in the world. And if an individual person follows his dharma always, he will attain moksha. That is liberation from the cycle of rebirths. He will cease to be born on earth and will return to Brahman, merging with him in eternal bliss and peace. Moksha is the primary goal of any Hindu. The individual drop returns to the ocean again and becomes one with it. Hindus also believe that the universe is infinite in time, yet it is divided into cycles. Each cycle is divided into 4 epochs, which are called yogas in Hinduism. The length of each epoch is different, but a complete cycle of 4 epochs lasts 4,320,000 years. At the end of each cycle, there is more evil in the world. Morality falls. People become evil and cruel, and this leads to the destruction of the world and then to its rebirth. The last epoch in the cycle is called the Kali Yuga. And of course, as in most other religions, it is the one we are living in now, the end of times, when everything in the world is bad and terrible, and the end of the world is coming soon. In Hinduism, there is simply a huge number of sacred scriptures. They can be conditionally divided into 2 types. The first type is the Vedas, which supposedly were not created by people, but have always existed by themselves. People simply wrote them down. They contain laws on how to live. At the same time, the Vedas have been passed down from generation to generation in oral form for many centuries. And they were written down much later than they appeared. The second type of scriptures are epics and poems that expound the philosophy of Hinduism in the form of various stories. Among this type of writings is the Mahabharata, the world's longest poem, which is 8 times longer than the Bible. It has a text called the Bhagavad Gita. It is perhaps the most important part of it. In this section, the god Krishna has a conversation with the warlord Arjuna before a great battle and explains to Arjuna why he should fight and how to live properly. This is the kind of book you were probably once offered to read by Krishnaites on the street. There are many other scriptures in Hinduism, but we will not go into details. There are also many gods in this religion, and all gods are essentially manifestations of Brahman, that is, different hypostases of Brahman. Because of the large number of gods, many people consider Hinduism to be paganism, but in fact it is hardly such. Hinduism is closer to monotheism because although there are many gods, all of them are in fact one main god, just in different manifestations. Hinduism also has a trinity, 3 main forms of God: Vishnu, Shiva, and Brahma. Let's start with the last one. Brahma, not to be confused with Brahman. This is the god of creation who created our material universe. Interestingly, of all 3 deities, Brahma has the smallest number of devotees, and temples built in his honor are only a few in all of India, against tens of thousands built in honor of other gods. Shiva and Vishnu in Hinduism have different explanations for this. According to the first explanation, Brahma created our entire material universe, and because of him we are now all suffering. Naturally, such an act cannot command any respect. There are also legends that Shiva, one of the 3 main gods, cursed Brahma. Here's why. One day, Brahma and Vishnu decided to find out where a huge stone phallus, dug into the ground and extending far into the sky, begins and ends. In case anyone doesn't know, the phallus is a symbolic representation of the male penis. This phallus symbolized Shiva. Brahma turned into a swan and flew upwards, while Vishnu turned into a boar and started digging the earth downwards. Eventually, Vishnu could not find the beginning of the phallus in the earth and recognized that it had no beginning. However, Brahma, going higher and higher, whether in form or form somewhere else, could not find the end. But in doing so, he came across a flower, and he asked that flower to bear witness to the fact that Brahma had found the end of the huge infinite penis. Eventually, when word of this reached Shiva, he became very angry that someone was questioning the infinity of the penis dedicated to him. And so he cursed Brahma that no one would worship him. So that's the story. The second god in this trinity is Vishnu. He is the guardian of our universe and does everything to keep it in order. Periodically, Vishnu comes to Earth in the form of avatars. This is his incarnation on Earth in human form. His most important incarnations are Rama and Krishna. Each of these avatars has their own devotees, such as the Krishnaites, who worship Krishna in general. Vishnu with his avatars is the most popular god. Third on the list is Shiva. He is the god of destruction. His job is to destroy our universe at the very end of the cycle, in order for it to be reborn again and start a new cycle. Shiva also has many devotees in Hinduism. In general, there are many more gods in Hinduism, each of whom is responsible for something. The gods have children and wives. There were some conflicts between them and so on, but we will not go into it. The basic meaning of the Hindu pantheon, I hope I have conveyed to you. Central to Hinduism is the river Ganga. It is a very long river, 2,700 kilometers long, and it flows from the north of India, from the Himalayas to the southeast of that country. The water of this river is considered sacred. Hindus believe that it has the ability to purify a person. Every Hindu, at least once in his life, must make a pilgrimage to the Ganges, but those who live near it come to wash and drink its water constantly. It should be said that physically this river is very dirty, as the Indian cities on its banks with a huge population litter it with everything they can. But believers are not deterred by this. Besides being a place of illumination, the Ganga is also a place of burial. Hindus believe that the Ganga is a bridge between heaven and earth, so the bodies of the dead must somehow end up in this river. On the banks of this river, fires are constantly burning on which the corpses of people are burnt, after which their ashes and unburned remains are thrown into the Ganga. Sometimes the corpses of dead people are taken to the Ganga across the country to perform this ritual. There is an entire industry in India that specializes in transporting the bodies of the dead for this purpose. Poor people who cannot afford to pay for the transportation of a relative's corpse to the Ganges. Burn it in a local crematorium, then take the ashes, drive to the Ganges, and there scatter the ashes over the river. There are also very poor people who cannot pay for crematorium services, who do not even have money for firewood for the funeral pyre. Such people, if they live near the Ganga, simply throw the corpse of a dead person into the river, and it floats on, eventually breaking through the rocks or floating into the ocean. Corpses floating down the Ganges River in India are a completely common phenomenon. Let me remind you that at the very beginning, I spoke about the fact that Hindus drink water from the Ganges, considering it sacred, and also wash in it. They bottle it up and take it back to their homes, often to another part of India, far, far away. There are even special companies that draw this water from the Ganges and then distribute it all over the country. This water is used for washing babies, for ablutions before death, and even for making various Indian traditional medicines. Everyone knows about such a peculiarity of Hinduism as the veneration of cows. These animals among Hindus are considered sacred, honored, and worshipped. Cows symbolize a loving mother who gives care and her milk to nourish her children. In India, cows can walk safely anywhere, even on the busiest streets of India's largest cities. If you hit or maim a cow in any way, you will go to jail for it, as it is treated very strictly in India. The same goes for bulls. Cows and bulls live there until they are old and die by themselves after a long life, as many Indians profess vegetarianism. Milk and dairy products play a very important role in their diet, but Hindus do not stop there. They consume not only milk, but also matcha, a product made from cow urine and yogurt, which is sold in India, bottled and drunk. Indian traditional medicines are made from it, rubbed on it, children are washed in it, and so on. Cow dung is also actively used. It is a good fuel for stoves, used for heating, cooking, and for boiling water. Cow dung is also used as a plaster for walls, as it protects against mold. Dried cow poop is a very effective insect repellent. It is set on fire, and the smoke from the burning dried dung drives away bloodsuckers, so it is used to fumigate houses. Cow dung is also used internally as an Ayurvedic medicine, usually mixed with milk, ghee, cow urine, and yogurt. This potion is believed to be able to cure many diseases and give strength to whoever takes it. Cow slaughter is banned in India in almost all states. However, there are a few states where it is allowed. Enterprising Hindus take their cows there and sell them in a slaughterhouse. This meat is then sold to the local Muslim and Christian population. Exporting beef abroad is strictly prohibited in India. Everyone knows about such a book as the Kama Sutra. Most people immediately imagine a book with pictures of positions for intercourse. However, not everyone knows that the real original Kama Sutra consists of far more than that. In general, the Kama Sutra is an ancient Indian treatise. The word kama in Sanskrit means sensual pleasures. These are the pleasures every man should strive for. So Kama Sutra is a treatise about kama, that is about such pleasures. The description of positions for intercourse is only 1/5 of this book. All the rest are instructions on how to be a good citizen, how to take care of a woman, how to organize and conduct a wedding, as well as how to seduce people and dispose them to themselves. And in the original Kama Sutra, there were no pictures with poses, only their descriptions. It is interesting that many poses are named in honor of animals, as they imitate their sexual intercourse. So, according to the Kama Sutra, in such poses one should make the same sounds that are made by the animals in honor of which these poses are named. The treatise was translated into English at the end of the 19th century by an Englishman and published in a very small edition. The price of this book was then artificially inflated so that it could not be bought by the average Briton. The book, because of its very salacious content, was intended only for study by specialists. This was its status in Britain until the 1960s, when the sexual revolution happened there and the Kama Sutra began to be rented out to the general public. However, most modern books called the Kama Sutra are not the whole book, but only the talisman part on the poses. There is one horrible and cruel tradition in Hinduism, which fortunately is hardly practiced in the modern world, as it is universally banned in India. This ritual is called Sati. It consists in the fact that when a married man dies, his widow is burned alive with him on a funeral pyre, and family members and relatives stand around to watch the process. Formally in Hinduism, such self-immolation of the widow is a voluntary matter. That is, if she does not want to do it, she does not have to. But one has to realize that there is social pressure on such a widow, and she is expected to want to follow her dead husband to the funeral pyre herself. And if she hesitates, the community is quick to remind her of what it means to be a faithful wife, and in effect, force her to perform such a ritual. During the ritual, women would sit or lie on the funeral pyre next to their husband's body. There were also instances where they would jump into the already burning pyre. Often they were also tied up and immobilized so that they would not escape from this pyre when it began to burn. The meaning of this ritual is explained in several ways. First, the wife knows what awaits her in case of her husband's death and will not poison him. Also in ancient India, a widow, especially if she was childless, had no one to stand up for her. She could not earn money, and she could not receive her dead husband's inheritance. Therefore, after his death, the widow had a humiliating and poor life. She would be harassed, raped, and abused by various strange men. Also, in the olden days, Hindus believed, and even now actually believe, that a widow brings bad luck. It is impossible to communicate with her, and even to be near her. In order to avoid all this, widows were prescribed to die at the stake, together with the body of their husband. This ritual was most widespread in India in the 15th century. It was very common in those times, with many European travelers describing the ritual in their travel notes. After the 15th century, with the arrival of first Muslims in India, and then Europeans, a struggle against this tradition began, and it was banned in every possible way. However, it was impossible to control the observance of such a ban throughout the vast country, and the ritual sometimes takes place even in our time, although it is extremely rare. Only about 40 such cases have been recorded in the last 70 years, and most often widows simply jump into the burning fire themselves without any compulsion. In Indian traditions, women who have committed sati are considered heroes, as it is considered the highest form of showing love and devotion. Therefore, some women go for it themselves to fight sati. In India, a law has been passed that all people who witness forced sati are considered accomplices in murder and therefore must be tried. Even in ancient times, there was another custom. It was called kukar. It consists in the fact that if an enemy army comes to a city, the women soldiers who will defend this city commit mass self-immolation before the battle with the enemy. They do it so that the soldiers who lost their wives had nothing to lose, nowhere to return to, and thus were not afraid to give their lives in battle. This is the kind of wonderful tradition that Hindu believers once had. Since ancient times, Indian society has had a special social system. Their society is divided into castes, that is, strata, and each caste occupies a different social position in society. Here is a diagram of Indian castes in the form of a pyramid. At the very top are the Brahman castes, which include the priests and gurus. Immediately above them are the Kshatriyas, which is the caste of warriors and rulers. Below them are the Vaishyas, who are traders, farmers, and herdsmen. And below them are the Shudras, who are simple laborers, cleaners, and servants. At the very bottom of the pyramid are the untouchables, who are not a caste at all. They are as if outside this caste system. But with this, the attitude of all other castes, the untouchables are considered the lowest of the people. It is believed that untouchables are able to defile themselves by interacting with members of other higher castes. Untouchables traditionally did the dirtiest, hardest, and most degrading work in India. They caught rats, cleaned cesspools, burned corpses, and slaughtered. In Hinduism, there is a big distinction between something dirty and something spiritually unclean. Dirty can be, for example, a street or shoes, but there is such a thing as unclean. That is something that is spiritually unclean. Such things include, for example, human feces, matcha, and animal corpses. An ordinary Hindu should not touch such things, but people of the untouchable caste can touch them, and therefore become untouchable themselves. At the moment in India, the scheduled caste is about 17% of the total population. In modern India, any form of discrimination is illegal, just as, for example, racism or sexism is illegal in the United States. But in practice in India, the untouchables are still discriminated against and are constantly subjected to violence by others. It is not uncommon in the Indian countryside for an untouchable to be killed for drinking water from a well reserved for the upper castes, or for paying attention to a girl from a higher caste. Even in establishments, they have to drink and eat from utensils specially designed for the untouchables, which means that the establishment runs the risk of losing upper caste customers. And even more recently, 30, 50 years ago, upper caste Hindus did not go to restaurants and establishments at all because they could never be sure that there were no untouchables working in the kitchen of that restaurant. Therefore, they all ate at home. According to the caste system, untouchables are not allowed to enter Hindu temples, even though they are considered Hindu themselves. So, they have their own temples, their own gods, and their own rituals. The government fights against all this, but it is difficult to control it all in India with its huge population. According to Indian tradition, the groom should come to the wedding on horseback. So when untouchables follow this custom, they too are often attacked. In 2008, in the Indian state of Rajasthan, an untouchable groom rode a horse to his wedding for the first time. So he was guarded by over 400 policemen and several ambulances. The government organized this to combat caste discrimination. According to Hinduism, a member of each caste must accept his or her position and follow his or her dharma, that is, his or her prescription for how to live. If you follow your dharma and observe all religious laws, then in the next life, you will become a member of a higher caste. That is why many people in India are satisfied with this system. In general, this system is really very convenient for the ruling elites of the past, as it allows to keep under control the masses of unthinking people who simply accept the artificial restrictions created for them. Traditionally, marriages between different castes were almost impossible, simply because a person from a higher caste would not marry a person from a lower caste. Modern Indian attitudes towards the caste system are no longer as strict, especially in the big cities. Young people in cities often do not pay attention to caste belonging of other people, are ready to be friends with representatives of other castes, and even enter into relationships with them on Indian dating sites. Many Indians even specifically put a note that they do not care about the caste of a potential boyfriend or girlfriend. However, in rural areas, Moors are much more traditional, and there are many more people there who will not get involved with lower castes. In villages and hamlets, doctors, that is, people with higher education, often refuse to treat untouchables and enter their homes. They are not allowed to enter police stations, and children of untouchables cannot attend schools. If untouchables refuse to abide by these norms, the consequences for them can be dire. They are simply lynched. Every week in India, according to statistics, approximately 15 untouchables are killed every week on the grounds of class hatred against them. Also, every week about 5 houses of untouchables are burnt down in a fire deliberately set by their neighbors. The Indian government is now in the process of organizing an opportunity for the untouchables to become members of the caste system. Let me remind you that they are, as it were, in it. The scheduled caste already has its own large representation in the parliament of the country, and there are quotas in state institutions, according to which a certain number of jobs should be given to the untouchables. In 1999, India even elected its first and so far only president, who was from the scheduled caste. And the people, by the way, loved him very much. There is one big and unpleasant problem in India that affects more than half of the country's population. There are no toilets at home, so most of these people go to the toilet outside, on roadsides, in forests, in a clear field, or just behind the house. The reason for this is not only because of poverty, but also because human feces is considered unclean in India. If a person has caste, it is not allowed to touch them as it will entail spiritual defilement. Human feces so illuminates everything around with negative energy that Hindus try to do everything to keep feces out of their homes. Therefore, they do not have a toilet at home from where they can take a dump, as long as the products of human activity are lying in the toilet bowl waiting to be flushed. They are still on the property of the house and defiling it. For this reason, especially religious and pious Hindus prefer to go to the toilet in the open air, in a clear field. Fecal matter ends up in sewage or simply in rivers and wells, which contributes to the spread of disease. The Indian government is doing a lot to eradicate this problem, but it is very hard to fight this ancient tradition. The government builds public toilets in every neighborhood, hoping that residents will go there. Some do, but many don't because they are just used to doing so, as their ancestors have done for thousands of years. Many public toilets are set up in a very interesting way. Sewerage in India is not available everywhere, so you have to use pit latrines. However, they have to be cleaned out periodically and you are not allowed to touch the feces. Some may call in untouchables to do this task, but this is a form of discrimination that is being fought in India. A solution was devised. Public toilets are built with 2 deep pit latrines. Over a period of several years, one pit slowly fills up with feces, and then, by means of a mechanism, the pipe from the toilet changes position and directs the sewage into the second pit, which also begins to fill up. Thus, this method avoids the problem of disposing of feces without having to touch it. While the second pit is filled with feces, in the first pit they dry up and turn into a kind of fossilized, solid dung. And this dung is no longer considered unclean by Hindus. It can be safely taken in hand and even used as fertilizer for plants. You might ask what this fact about toilets has to do with Hinduism, because it seems to be just a national peculiarity. But no, it is because of their religious faith that Hindus have created for themselves a completely unnecessary, absurd problem of no toilets, simply because they believe that human feces have negative magical properties, and because of this belief, people die of diseases every year in the country. But that's not all. India is one of the leaders in the world in terms of rape. Many women in poor villages and hamlets in India never go to a public restroom or field alone. Mind you, they do not have their own toilet, of course. Thus, many of the women purposely in hot India restrict themselves in water and food to go to the toilet no more than once a day. They recruit other women for such a trek so that they will not be raped there. If they go out in nature to urinate, they do it in groups too, as it is the only way to safely defecate. This is the kind of country and culture where tens of thousands and millions of Westerners go every year for spirituality, wisdom, gurus, and enlightenment. Which religion would you like me to tell you about next time? Write about it in the comments. I read them all. Also, comments are very helpful in promoting videos. And to continue the topic, I suggest you watch my episodes about sex. It will be interesting. The link is right on the screen. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click on the bell to get this video seen by more people. Thanks for watching. Bye.